Alright guys, today we're going to talk to you a little bit about the engine braking on the 800 Crossfire high output. There's literally no good information online anywhere that can explain it to you or tell you about it. I even called the Cat Shack in Truro, which is our biggest dealer in Nova Scotia here, and I asked them about it and spoke with the service guy, and he basically never heard of it. So I want to start off by saying we started out with this sled this year. We had a Dayco high performance, the best belt you can get for the sled, and this belt has not very much use onto it. We're talking the sled had a bad fuel pump at the drag races, so we didn't really even get to, we only did one race with it. I did a few drag races in a field, nothing real crazy, just the ordinary. And anyway, we were out riding one day, and I noticed that the belt was literally like slipping in the clutch. When you went to take off, you could feel it chattering. So as soon as we got home, I pulled this Dayco off and did an inspection. And as you can see, it is pootered. It is just absolutely destroyed. And it was actually starting to separate here. The cord's loose into it. So it was ready to fail. This was a $269 belt. And I'm going to say that if that has 500 kilometers onto it, I'd be giving it every mile and every kilometer that it did. Because I doubt it even has that. So essentially that was just money fired in the trash can. When we got it home, a friend of mine gave me this new Articat belt, and he said you can run that until your new Dayco, or not new Dayco, sorry, my new Ultimax. I'm done with Dayco belts. We're now on the Ultimax because we push our sleds to the max all the time. We drive fast, we run the trails fast, we do off-trail riding, so the machines definitely see their use. So with that old wore out belt onto it, you really didn't notice the engine brake as bad for the last season. Last year we didn't get to drive much. This season we've been driving a lot, so I'm going to talk about two things here. Immediately after putting this Cat belt on, the vibration was gone. Obviously the other belt was shot, okay? Sled performed way better. The next drive we went out on, the wife says, the engine brake, whatever in that sled, she said, is like super, super aggressive. And I thought, okay. So I took it for a drive, and I was like, wow, no, like she's right. At 50 mile an hour, you let off the throttle, and basically the computer revs the engine to make the front clutch engage as you're coasting, and uses the engine compression and whatever to slow you down in a simple terminology. So I think a lot of it is tune-related rate in the ECU. But that being said, now my XF coasts along great. I don't even notice an engine brake at all in this machine. So the first thing I did this morning was I have a spare computer and a different set of injectors out of a newer machine just like this. So I thought, well, maybe there was like a tune update or something, right? So I stuck this newer computer in, changed the injectors from circle to squares. You always got to make sure your injectors matches that computer. There's circle, square, and triangle. A lot of people don't know that either. But anyway, we switched it all over. I took it for a drive, and I was like, holy hell, like this engine brake is still just, it's almost like you're literally applying the brakes. It's so aggressive at higher speeds when you let off. So I got looking, and I thought, well, maybe it's because of this reverse setup and this reverse helix on these clutches. But in theory, if this back clutch is opening when you're coasting, it's going to make your belt looser, which means in order for the motor to rev and make the front clutch grab, it's going to have to rev the motor higher. So in theory, really, it can't be the secondary clutch causing this issue. And as I dug into it, I then said to Steve, I remember back in the day when I used to first start running these Dayco belts, what I find is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so as I was saying before my phone so rudely decided to kill the battery in the cold, my theory is I believe these Dayco belts are made of a slightly harder rubber compound, or maybe it's just slipperier. And I noticed even sometimes with a brand new Dayco and the big track, if you were in a real heavy snow situation, sometimes you could get a little belt slippage off the bat, which is not ideal. But to say the least, that belt didn't last very long. It didn't really perform that well. So now that this cat belt's on here, what I always found in the past as well is these cats are always sort of green colored as soon as they get wearing. So whatever chemical or whatever's in these belts, it is different than all the rest, because I've never seen any other brand of belt turn green. But what I do notice is these cat belts are a lot stickier. You will never ever have your belt slip on a clutch if your springs and everything is in order and the clutches are working properly. These belts do not slip. At least I've never experienced it. So my theory was, okay, so the engine brake's more aggressive since we get rid of the old slippery Dayco and put this sticky cat belt on. So I tried a different clutch, and I knew it wasn't the secondary, so the machine still acted the same when I switched the clutch. But I did find something that worked. Now, it didn't totally cure it, but it definitely took the aggressiveness out of it. And it was very simple to do, and I basically just thought about it for a little while. So like I said, in theory, your back clutch, even if it's spinning and opening because you're coasting so fast, it's going to make your belt loose, which is definitely not the issue of what's going on. But the tighter this belt is, when the engine brake decides to engage through the computer or whatever, that your motor starts revving up to grab, the less tension on this belt, the less aggressive the engine brake is. And it basically took me all day playing with this to try to figure it out and get it a little bit better. We started by playing with the primary a little bit. I added some weight, I took some weight away. I've got this thing dialed in pretty deadly, so I don't like playing with it, even though it is simple and easy. I know it's set where it needs to be, and this machine works really well. But when I put this Arctic Cat belt on, I basically played with these shims for a little bit, because I always prefer my belt to sit a little bit above the sheath of the clutch. You know, especially your cooling vent, or obviously just the cooling vent. You don't want it that your bottom ribs are showing, but it definitely doesn't hurt to have the top edge showing a little bit. And again, this is my newer machine that doesn't do it, so I was sort of, you know, looking at this and seeing what was different, other than the clutches being a different design. And this has the Dalton helix, so instead of using the spacers, this is my adjustment to make the belt ride. But as you can see in this one, my belt is just a little bit past flush, not quite flush. When you rub it, it's all belt, you don't actually touch the sheath. But again, this sled doesn't do it. This sled was the one with the engine braking being super aggressive. Now, that's an Ultimax belt that I've put, I'm going to say there's 16 or 1700 kilometers in this belt already this year, from when I put it on new. And yes, it is glazed a little bit, but this Ultimax belt performs like all get out. I'm never buying another Dayco belt again. It's going to be Ultimax on everything from now on. And I do have an Ultimax in the mail. Should be here any minute for this, because I got to give my friend his belt back. But basically what I did was I took this bolt out, and when you get that bolt out, there's these little shims behind this O-ring on the inside of your clutch cover washer thing, whatever you want to call it. So the more of these that you add to it, the more it closes your back clutch when you bolt it together. And if you add a lot to it, you want to be real careful the first couple drives and the first few kilometers that you double check that, because they're known to have that bolt back out when you shim them a lot. Now what I did was the exact opposite, because I said, well, if I can get this belt a little bit looser, then it should slip a little easier on the front clutch when it's trying to engine brake. And that is exactly what I accomplished here. So I took all of these off. Right now there's currently no bushing, or sorry, no shim washers behind the O-ring. It's just plate to plate. And what that did is it opened the clutch up enough that the belt is, when I touch it, it's flush with the sheath. So it's not quite shimmed as good as that one, for say. But even though it's dropped down in the clutch a little bit, I really didn't lose no bottom end performance. It's you know, it's an 800cc machine. So would I say this is ideal? Not exactly, because I would like to have a little bit more height here, and I'm probably not finished playing with it yet. I've got a couple really thin versions of these, even thinner than this one, so I may try putting one into it and then, you know, do a test drive to see if the engine brake calmed down a little bit. But with no shim at all and my belt sitting flush with the sheath, I have definitely dialed this engine brake back at least 65, if not 70%. Now when you drive along 50 miles an hour and let off, it does actually sort of coast. When you get in that 30-20 mile an hour coasting range, it's definitely a lot less aggressive. It doesn't, you know, try to lock the track and throw you over the handlebars, for say. It wasn't quite that aggressive, but it's in the right situation. It was definitely not ideal, and I didn't like it. The wife didn't like it, so it had to be changed. And again, there's not a whole lot of information out there on this particular issue. I don't know. I'm sure somebody else has to notice this. But at least now, if you watch this video and understand what I just told you, you should be able to at least calm it down or dial it back. Now, if the Arctic Cat dealer is oblivious to it and it wasn't something that was recalled back in the day or whatever, then I guess nobody really seen it as an issue. But when you drive a sled without it that coasts, and then you drive one with it that's humping the RPMs when you're not on the throttle, and the belt's grabbing and on grabbing, and it's just being like a velocity nuisance, this is the only way so far I know that you can fix it. Now, what should have been done is they should have had, if it's in the computer tune, they should have had two tunes available, one with it, one without it, because it's a toss-up. I spent, you know, probably an hour and a half reading on Google today, and people saying like what a great thing it is, four-wheelers have it and all that crap. No, I'm sorry. If I want to coast down a hill, I want the machine to coast down the hill, and if I want to stop it, I will put the brakes on. I don't want the motor or the computer doing it for me. It's not a good drivability thing. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you learned something, and if you're not going to run an Arctic Cat belt in your Arctic Cat, don't waste your time with the Daycos. Go straight to the Ultimax. XS22, XS822 for the XFs, and XS819 for your Crossfires. Have a good day, guys, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
Yeah.